Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. I shot this video because we had Thursday afternoon, we had a 2012 Ford Edge come into the shop. It had the EcoBoost engine in it, and it was showing a P0299 code for turbocharger, supercharger, underboost. Now, when we scan the computer itself does not show a boost number for the vehicle. It only shows the percentage that the wastegate is closed. Now, that presented a problem because if we are trying to figure out an underboost condition, we need to know how much boost is it producing. Now, this vehicle should produce roughly 14 psi boost at an idle, as long as the turbocharger is functioning properly, and it should produce up to roughly 30 psi maximum. Now, if you enter the same vehicle as a 2013 Ford Escape with the 1.6 EcoBoost, you will get a boost number. That data is good even though the vehicle parameters are different. It is still giving you good data from the computer, including the percentage that the wastegate is closed. All that data is good even though the vehicle parameters are different. So entering it that way, we were not getting anything above 14 psi boost. Test driving the vehicle after clearing the codes, the wastegate would function, but as soon as the computer detected a condition, it would automatically default it to open, full open, so you would completely lose boost. Now, bringing it into the shop, the first and probably the easiest test to do on it was to see if hook a vacuum pump up to the wastegate actuator to see if the wastegate was closing, if the actuator was functioning. Which, when we did that on this particular vehicle, as you'll see in the video, the actuator was functioning. It would close like it should. So we went ahead and removed the catalytic converter from the exhaust housing of the turbocharger, because one problem that has shown up in a few of these edges with the EcoBoost is that the wastegate itself is just pressed into the actuator arm that's inside the exhaust housing, and over time the wastegate will fall free and end up in the catalytic converter. So after removing the catalytic converter, we determined that the wastegate was actually still in place, and at that point we performed another vacuum test on it to verify that it was functioning on the inside properly. When we pulled it closed with a vacuum, we actually found that in the full closed position of the actuator, the wastegate was not fully seated on the wastegate portion of the exhaust housing. You could, with it still closed, you could put your finger in there and you could actually still feel play in it. So to rectify that condition, I adjusted the length of the actuator rod on the wastegate. Now, going through this in the process, some things that we did find as well were that the the side of the turbo, the discharge side of the turbo on the intake we had an oil leak. It was leaking oil past the turbo seals and into the intake tube that runs up to the intercooler. Unfortunately, that pretty much denotes that you're going to need a new turbocharger, or you're going to have the one you have overhauled. Now at this point, the customers asked us to go ahead and put the vehicle back together so that they could drive it. I did check the end plate in the turbocharger. The bearings in the turbo are nice and tight. The seals are just leaking. And after adjusting the wastegate and putting everything back together in the shop under an engine brake condition, and the purpose of doing this was so that we could evaluate if our boost numbers did rise without having to drive the vehicle down the road, because trying to watch your boost number and drive at the same time is not necessarily the safest thing to do. And we did not have the ability in the shop to put another person with me at the time to evaluate this. That, and the customer was at the shop waiting for the vehicle to be returned. So in the shop, under an engine brake condition, we were producing above 16 psi of boost, just off an idle at roughly 1500 RPMs. So the turbocharger was functioning properly at this point. We did not do any tests on the turbo bypass on the intake side. Once we found the wastegate issue, we were trying to rectify that first to see if that would solve our problem before we tore into and did any further tests. Now, I did run a test on the turbo bypass through the scan tool, basically activating it through the scan tool, and it passed that test. So it was the actuator for it was functioning properly. Now I cannot guarantee that the actual bypass valve was functioning properly without taking it apart, but I can tell you that the condition that we did find was that the wastegate was not seating all the way when it was supposed to be in the full closed position. Now, unfortunately, we did not hear back from the customer after we returned the vehicle on Friday. We asked them to go ahead and drive it for the weekend, and they were choosing to drive it until they made a decision as to whether they wanted to spend the money on the turbocharger or not. So, hopefully for their sake, the turbocharger does not go out completely, which if it does, there's not much we can do. That was not our recommendation to turn the vehicle back over. Our recommendation was to go ahead and put the turbocharger on it. But that being said, I did reset the malfunction indicator lights so that all the computer codes or active codes were cleared. That way they would know if it did reset itself. They could bring it back to us and we could do some more diagnosis on it. But what you're about to see is the video that we shot in the shop while we were examining the vehicle. Now I apologize for the not so wonderful video quality. That was my first time using this camera in the shop. So some of the angles are not that great. I was relying on the wide angle lens to pick up a little bit more than what it did in some instances, or I didn't have it aimed quite right. I'm going to try and edit those out just so you don't have to be trying to look up above the top of the screen to figure out what I'm doing. But anyway, I hope you enjoy the video. Please comment, rate, and subscribe. And thank you for watching my channel. Okay, so as we get into this,
I'm just starting to get the car up on the lift. You can see I've got the license plate covered just to protect the identity of the owner. No reason to throw them out there. Now, a little bit that I have found out since this video was actually recorded. In the last, later on that day, they did call us back at the shop and decide that they were indeed going to order the turbocharger. So the turbocharger should be coming in probably tomorrow, if not tomorrow, Wednesday. And possibly, if all goes well, I will get some video of installing that. That should be a fairly interesting install. Now in the foreground here, you can actually see the Harbor Freight 5-drawer tool cart that I did a review on. That tool cart, I have been working out of it all week long. It has plenty of room for my tools. It rolls great around the shop. I mean, it makes it so much easier. I have no complaints whatsoever. The only complaint I do have is that I bought it, it would have been a week earlier on Thursday of this past week. And I got a coupon in the mail on Friday, I believe it was, that they had these on sale for $169 instead of the $199 I paid. So I think I'm going to have to take my coupon back up there and try and get a little bit of money back. But, aside from that, the thing works great. It has plenty of space. Now, what you can see right now, I'm actually working up in the car, trying to get the catalytic converter loose. That way I can inspect the exhaust side of the turbocharger. Unfortunately, it was a little tight in there, and I was hoping that the camera would pick up a little bit better view of what I was doing than what it did. Now, if you notice the light that I'm holding in my hand, that was the flashlight that I did the review on a while back as well. And there again, that thing, no complaints. I mean, it has been awesome. I've been using it. At this point, I've been using it for a full week. Still on the original battery I put in when I did the review. I dropped it on the concrete floor, I couldn't tell you how many times, and it has just performed flawlessly. No complaints there. Now, as you can see, unfortunately, I'm a pretty tall guy. This lift does not go nearly high enough for me, so even with it all the way up, I'm still a little bit cramped underneath the car. But I'm up in there right now trying to get the bolts that actually mount the torque converter loose. I couldn't take the torque converter all the way out because on this particular application there is a O2 sensor directly after the torque converter, not the torque converter, holy cow, the catalytic converter. Sorry, one of those days. There's an O2 sensor that's mounted directly in the back of the catalytic converter pipe, and there is no plug anywhere near it to unplug it. I followed about 3 feet of wire, and I never came across a plug for it. So I really didn't want to break it loose and risk twisting the wires up too bad trying to unthread it. So I just went ahead and left it in the converter and moved the converter out of the way the best I could. Now at this point, I just had to disappear off to the side of the screen because the tool cart, all I keep on the tool cart is just my basic service tools. I actually have a 301 piece Craftsman tool set plus an extra roughly 20 wrenches, pliers, some other odds and ends, basic tools, multimeter, some other measuring tools, diagnostic tools, a few impact sockets, but I don't have any of the impact wobble sockets or impact extensions, anything of that nature in there. So every once in a while I have to walk over to the big toolbox, grab some of those, but it's not a major ordeal. Most of the stuff that I need to actually do my service work every day fits right in there perfectly. Now I've actually jumped up here. I've got you up in the back of the up where the catalytic converter was, and it's kind of hard to see, but I'm looking at at this point I'm actually feeling the wastegate. I had been pumping the vacuum pump to close the wastegate in the previous shot. You can barely see the vacuum pump here at the very bottom left hand corner of the screen. And I'm sorry there's not a lot of light in there. I was trying to hold the light and position the camera and work the vacuum pump all at the same time, and it's not always the easiest thing to do. And unfortunately it's very difficult to see the control rod for the wastegate moving in this shot. Here I'm actually doing a visual inspection inside the tail end of the turbocharger, and I'm going to try and get the camera up in the exhaust housing in a minute. There will be a brief glimpse of the wastegate if you're looking for it and know what you're looking for, but unfortunately it was really tight on that side, and I was having trouble getting the camera in a good position to actually be able to see into the exhaust housing. Okay, there's your wastegate right there at the top of the screen, and unfortunately if you can back up and freeze frame and go one frame at a time, you can get a little bit better view of it, but it's not great, unfortunately. Now, about center of the bottom of the screen, if you can see the casting line in the turbocharger, that accordion looking line is actually your oil return. And now I'm going to try it. This is the rubber intake tube, and I actually did get a fairly decent shot in here. If you look down at the bottom of the tube, you can actually see the shiny puddle of oil at one point. I'm trying to get the flashlight in a decent position here, but it's hard to do. But you can see right at the very front bottom of the tube, there was a little bit of oil there. That oil is coming from the seals in the intake side of the turbocharger, and it's getting sucked up through the intake on the engine. Now at this point I've actually am going through and getting everything reassembled, getting all the clamps tightened back up, and getting the car ready to come down so I can test to see if it is making a boost or not. The only thing I can say is I do not know right now if the malfunction indicator light came back on in the vehicle. I may possibly, if I get the chance when I put the turbocharger on, do kind of an update video and see how things went. I have to say, I think these little engines in these EcoBoost vehicles are amazing. This engine in particular, and I haven't had a chance to do a lot of research on any of the other ones, but it is I believe it's a 2.0 liter in this Edge. And it's direct injected. So it has a high pressure mechanical fuel pump that mounts up on top of the engine that actually raises the fuel pressure up over 1500 psi to inject it into the cylinders. And honestly, for that small of an engine, that thing gets roughly, I think, 23 to 24 miles to the gallon, which is not bad for a vehicle of that size. And I think it would actually average better in a highway cruising condition. That was what the mileage that I have seen, were more back road, stop and go, what might be considered like city driving. So, but in nice little vehicles. I just think that those EcoBoost engines are interesting. But at this point, I'm just working on getting everything buttoned back up, getting the catalytic converter put back in place. You know, typical, get it done so we can get it down off the rack and back to the customer. But at this point, I'll just be quiet. I'll let you enjoy the rest of the video. And I did cut the audio track out in the previous portions of the video because it was a lot of us just talking back and forth in the shop. I did plan on recording the voiceover for this. So hopefully, maybe this has been helpful to somebody. Maybe you just find it interesting. But
what you do, Carl?
I appreciate your comments. I appreciate your thoughts. Love it if you would subscribe to the channel. Please rate the video. Give it a thumbs up. Give it a thumbs down. If you give it a thumbs down, let me know. Let me know what made you give it a thumbs down. That way, maybe in the future, I can make my videos a little bit better. And hopefully they will get better. This is my first attempt at actually editing together a video from multiple clips, taking it multiple different times, throwing in the voiceover, and I'm hoping that it's all going to turn out well and look good on camera. It did get a little bit lengthy at this point. I think maybe next time I will actually do a little bit more time-lapse shooting for some of these clips, because I did have to do a lot of cutting to shorten these clips up to get the time down. When I put all the original clips together, I had over an hour worth of video clips, and that was just way too much to keep anybody interested. But as I said before, please comment, rate, subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed the video.